What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be rebuilding a drive shaft that I actually got lucky and got for free from a local guy. The reason I got it for free is it needed to be rebuilt, you know, new U-joints, new carrier bearing. He just opted to get a whole new drive line instead of dealing with that. So we're going to go ahead and put 3 U-joints and a carrier bearing in it. So I'm also going to be kind of doing a little experiment here. So the slip yoke actually is normally up by the carrier bearing underneath of the truck. And what I'm going to do when I swap out these U-joints on the other drive line is I'm going to put the slip yoke down here, which should give me a lot better clearance off-road as far as right here goes, and also be stronger in case you end up hitting a rock or something like that. You can see where the clearance comes from just because it's a lot skinnier of a shaft. And I know what you're thinking. The engineers put it down there for a reason. Don't do that. Well, this is kind of an experiment, so I'm going to let you know how it goes, let you know if I get some weird vibrations from it. Online, a few people have done it with good success and no complaints. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it a shot, and because I get to try it, you'll get to find out if it works or not. Before you pull your drive line off the truck, you're going to want to index where your flange met to your other flange, just so you can put it back where it was. I know it's going to be different because we're flipping this around, but just go ahead and do it for the front. You could end up getting a vibration afterwards. It's kind of one of those things I've always done. I haven't not done it just because I don't want any problems. As you can see also on this drive shaft, it's been marked by somebody else. So these are our index marks for that U-joint. This U-joint is, so basically I'm going to keep this same plane over here, so this will just get rotated 180 degrees, so it'll kind of still be indexed where it was. Okay, so we're working on our center joint here. We're going to go ahead and get this shaft separated. It'll make it easier to work with both of the ends. First thing we're going to want to do is get these clips out of the end. And all you're really going to need is a set of pliers like this. Sometimes you may need a hammer and a little chisel to kind of break it free to get that initial shock to it. There we go, so that just pops out. Then you can just go kind of throw that to the side. Our new joint is gonna come with new clips. So we're gonna go around and go ahead and release all the clips around on all 4 sides. With all of our clips out, and I kind of wire brushed this and cleaned it up, go ahead and get a socket that the cap of the U-joint will fit inside. This is 1 1/16". It's a 12 point, which may or may not make a difference. Take the vise, and the vise is going to be supporting this shaft over here. And the joint we're trying to take apart is kind of floating. So without the clips in, what we're going to do is basically take the socket like this and drive this down with a hammer. And as we do that, because this is supported, it will bring this cap upwards. So we'll go ahead and do this side, and then we're going to flip it over and do the exact same thing over there. And then after we do that, we should be able to kind of slip this drive shaft off of the U-joint, and then we will be separated. And you can see our cap's already starting to rise here. I'm not even having to hit it very hard. So this is pretty much at its limit. So now we're going to flip it over. We're going to do the same thing to this side. All right, both of our caps sticking out, and as you can see, the drive shaft is already starting to come apart. Okay, with our drive shaft separated, obviously you can do the same thing we just did and remove that other bit of U-joint. Now, because this flange, because we're flipping it, is actually going to go here now. So what I'm going to do is remove the flange on the end. Then we will work on reassembling this side of the joint. And then after that, carrier bearing, other joint, and then put these together. All right, with the drive shaft flipped around, take a wire brush, clean all this out. It's gonna make your life easier on install. Make sure there's no burrs or anything that's gonna prevent the caps from seating in there easily or correctly. Okay, so now for reassembly, we're gonna go ahead and do our flange On our slip yoke side, this is going to be attaching to the diff, and this is the part where we're flipping. If you're not flipping the drive shaft, you will not be putting the flange on this side. The flange will be on the back side. So as you can see inside of these caps, you can see all those little roller needles, and you have to be very careful to make sure that those don't come out of place, because then you won't be able to assemble your U-joint and it won't compress all the way because it'll be in the way. What I'm going to do is take a little bit of extra grease and rub it in there around the splines, and that'll kind of help hold them in place. Just keep that in mind that you're kind of dealing with a delicate situation as far as that goes. Okay, so we're going to be using the vise to our advantage here on assembly. We're not going to be beating and banging on it like we were to get it disassembled. Basically, you're going to want to open this thing up, and we're going to use the vise to compress and get these caps started actually. All right, so we got that one just started. We're not driving it all the way because we need some space to get this in there. Go ahead and slip your U-joint in. And then now, we're gonna do our other side. Go ahead and get that one started. And then you can kind of also find like a median to where you can, once you get them in there enough, you can have it started on both caps, and it'll capture your needles and make sure they don't go anywhere. All right, this is mostly assembled. We're still gonna have to drive these caps in more to get rid of some of that play. But next we're gonna go ahead and get our caps started on our flange, and then we'll go around and make sure and get everything seated. Now once you got all your caps in there and your U-joint is captured, you can see we still got some slop to the sides, but that's okay. We're about to fix that with a socket that is the same size as your cap here. And basically all we're gonna do is use the vise again to sandwich it and help drive it in. And it's okay if you drive it in too far. Don't be worried about that, because we're actually gonna put a clip in, and then when we do the other side, it'll push this one back to where it needs to be and seat it against our clip. So you see we got this side in. This is also the one that's gonna have our grease fitting on it. So it's gonna be this clip and not this clip. All right, we got the clip seated right there. We're gonna go ahead and turn it and use our socket again, but on the opposite side. So now it's gonna drive this cap in where it needs to be, and it'll push this one up against the clip and seat it. And you'll know you have it far enough in if your clip is able to seat in its groove like that. Go ahead and repeat the process for this side, and then I'll show you how to make sure it's nice and even and not too tight. All right, once all of our clips are in, you'll notice it might be kind of stiff in some directions. What I like to do is go around and use our socket from earlier, kind of like disassembling it, but with the clips in, and it'll just kind of help seat everything where it's supposed to be. So you can already see how that's nice and free now, but there's no play. And you repeat for the inside. All right, nice and free, no play, and that's a good joint right there. Okay, so here's our other end of the shaft. This is what attaches to the transfer case. We're gonna kind of go ahead, it's rinse and repeat. We're gonna do this joint real quick, and then we'll disassemble this joint, and we'll pull this spline or this yoke off and get our carry bearing replaced. All right, we're looking at our yoke on our carrier bearing side. This is a 15/16 nut. We're gonna go ahead and pull that off. Before you pull off your yoke, you're gonna wanna index it. Took a punch, made a mark here, and took a punch and made a small mark here. You're gonna wanna line these back up after we replace the carrier bearing. There may be an index from previous installation. This one isn't really indexed very much, so I'm just gonna go ahead and pull it off as is. With our nut and our washer off, this yoke is actually gonna slide off, and it may be a little stuck, or it may just come off like that for me. Got pretty lucky on that one, I'd say. Last time I did it, it was a little stuck, and I had to kind of take a hammer and chisel and kind of give it a little bit of persuasion. Okay, so this metal piece captures the rubber bushing. There's actually a bearing that is kind of pressed onto this shaft, and the bearing is what, you know, allows it to spin. So what I normally do is take a big screwdriver, or sometimes you can even take your hands, and I'm gonna pull this rubber bushing and this housing off of the bearing that's on the shaft. All right, with this part off, we are left with this bearing right here, which we are gonna have to drive off of this shaft. So I got this thing flipped around sitting in the vise. Do not clamp tight on the drive shaft. You do not want to dent it and cause a vibration. So I got it in there just enough to hold it, but not to really do any damage to the outside of this thing. We're gonna use a punch like this and a hammer, and possibly a bigger hammer depending on how stuck it is. And we're gonna go ahead and hit this lip here and try to drive it off this way. Go ahead and take a rag, make sure your surface is nice and clean. In some instances, these new carrier bearings have a hook that help you assemble it. Generally that means this is basically going to be facing the back of the truck, that's going to be facing the front of the truck, and you'll see what I'm talking about if yours looks like that. This needs grease in this channel right here. As you can see, this one came pre-greased. The last one I did didn't have that, so that's nice. Just make sure you got some grease in there. All right, we're going to go ahead and slide this on, and you're not going to be able to seat this by hand. We're actually going to pull it on with our yoke here. So remember, we indexed our shaft so we could line it back up. So rotate it around until you find your mark that you previously made. Go ahead and line it up at that mark. If for some reason you did forget to make a mark, generally, or from what I've seen, this is gonna be on the same plane as this one. So it'll be kind of like they're matching and in line. As you see, we can't yet put our nut on our threads to put our yoke on. I'm just gonna take a socket and I'm gonna give it some taps on there, and that'll help drive that bearing onto the shaft. There we go, now we got our threads exposed. Go ahead and put your washer on there, and then we'll go ahead and get our nut started. Let me go ahead and tighten this down. Basically run it up until it's stopped, and then I'm gonna lightly snug this. Once we got that snugged up, we're gonna go ahead and torque this to 134 foot-pounds. All right, so that's torqued to spec. We're gonna go ahead and take our chisel, bend in one of these corners, and it's supposed to help it keep from coming undone. And then from there, we're gonna take a wire brush again, clean this all up. Then we're gonna assemble the two shafts, just like we did the other U-joints. So basically repeat the same process of what you've already done. All right guys, we got it all assembled. So as you see, I talked about before, the drive shaft flipped. The slip yoke is going to be by the differential now, which will give us some more clearance here. We'll have a skinnier shaft closer to the ground instead of a bigger one, and we'll see how it works out for me. I do want to say, some trucks come like this from the factory, not second gen Tacoma specifically. I believe first gen Tacoma, the slip yoke is actually at the diff. A lot of older, I think, Land Cruisers are, and of course, you know, assortment of other trucks. So it's not something that goes completely against the grain. It is a way that it is oriented in some vehicles, and really it doesn't benefit you unless you go off-road. In my case, it will, and I'll gain some clearance. All right, rebuilt drive shaft is all installed. You can see the amount of clearance you gain by having that skinny side on the bottom versus the thick side. flange bolts torqued to 65 foot-pounds. And she's ready to go. Thanks for watching, guys. If you have any comments or questions, go ahead and ask me down below and I will answer you to my best ability. I'll let you know, I'll pin a comment at the top after I get a drive in and let you know how it does and see if I get any vibrations or anything of that nature. I got a pretty good wheeling trip going to Uwharrie National Forest here in a couple weeks. So I'm thinking that this drive shaft mod will probably kind of help save my drive shaft maybe in a situation or two, but we'll just have to see. So once again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.